This is Made for More Living with Johnny Jennings, powered by eXp Realty. Online at madeformoreliving.com.
Do you know the number one question I am asked as a real estate agent as it pertains to solar? It is, how much is solar going to increase the value of my home? If I'm leasing it, if I own it, is there a difference? Will it increase it a lot? Will it increase it at all? Well, you are in luck, because today we have Shawn Davis with SolarWise, and he is going to answer that question, put it to bed, so you know once and for all, how much does solar really increase the value of your home, Shawn?
Thank you, Johnny. Yeah, that's a great question. I also get that question, and it's very common. And the reality of it is it's often the forgot about part of the financial equation of solar that people miss. Solar does add value to a house. Now, there's been several different studies. So let's take real estate, for example. I think Zillow did a study, I want to say it was in 2018 or 2019, that basically profiled all of the transactions that they had for certain markets. They looked at houses that had solar. They looked at houses that did not have solar. And that was the only differentiation was, does it have solar? Does it not have solar? And what Zillow came up with was solar adds about 4% value to the house. Now, let me be very clear. I didn't like that study because I think that there's a lot of other things that go into the value of a property other than just the energy cost. So in other words, I've been in houses in rural Placer County that's maybe a 900 square foot house that has a $600 or $700 utility bill. For that house, solar would add more value than I would be in a house in Sacramento that might be a 4,000 square foot house that has a $150 bill. That 4,000 square foot house in Sacramento could be worth $1.5 million, and that solar system mitigating a $150 utility bill isn't going to add $100,000 of value to that property, right? So here's what, instead of fixating on an exact amount. Now, by the way, there was another study that was done, and this was commissioned by the Department of Energy, that I think is more accurate to the concern that I have about there's a lot of other things that go into the value of a home other than the energy cost, right? This study came back that for every dollar that you can mitigate in renting your electricity from a utility, you're going to create, in the mind of a buyer, you're going to create $20 in value. That's how they quantified it to an actual dollar amount. You're going to create $20 in value in the mind of a purchaser. So stated simply, if I've got a $2,000 energy cost expense and solar mitigates that completely, that solar system might add $40,000 of value to that particular property. But set both of those aside. Okay, let me speak to the person out there in PG&E territory that is lamenting the $400, $500, $600, $800 utility bills that they're getting from PG&E, that has wanted to explore solar. And let me talk to that person. Right now, if you were going to move and you were going to buy a house, would you not prioritize a house that has solar versus a house that doesn't, understanding the jeopardy of the current utility environment and the cost therein?
Absolutely. And
would you not potentially pay more, a little bit more? I mean, if you had a house that normally, because of its size and its location, had a $600, $700 a month utility bill that now is negligible because of solar, how much more affordability? I mean, think about interest rates right now and how much more house you could afford with $600 or $800 of expense that you didn't have to pay for, right? So what I like to say is everybody agrees it's going to add some value. The big question is how much. But stated a different way, if I'm right about what's coming in California, as California mandated in 2019, moving forward, that all new construction has to have solar, I would argue that a house that doesn't have solar, if you go to sell this year, 5 years from now, the longer the time between now and when you go to sell that you don't have solar, I think you're going to be at a significant selling disadvantage compared to other houses. Because imagine some young couple looking for a house or move-in buyer, somebody transferring from a different state. I mean, if all things are considered equal and you love House A and House B, but House B has its own power plant that mitigates your PG&E bill, House A doesn't, which house is that, thinly qualified purchaser going to purchase? I think it's going to be the house with solar, right? So
absolutely. So what most people look at when we're taking people out and looking at like how much home, they're not so necessarily like they care about the purchase price, but what they care about more is the monthly. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Interest rates, right?
Yeah.
Is there an HOA, Melrose, things like that. And so what I'm hearing you say is that how much is that solar benefit going to really impact the monthly? Are they going to see a savings of $200 a month, $400 a month? Because that is what they're trying to fit into their budget.
Yes.
How much can they expect to pay a month?
Yes. So think about it this way. What are the 3 or 4 most significant costs of home ownership, right? Number 1 is the mortgage. Right. Number 2 is probably homeowners insurance, depending on the area.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically in like Placer County and wildfire threat areas.
I just got a quote for a lady. She's 97 years old. The quote was $4,500 a year.
Yes.
On a home that's paid for.
Now, you really want to get some people upset? I would put 90% of that increase in cost of homeownership on PG&E's responsibility as well.
100%.
Because if it wasn't for their wildfires that caused devastation and destruction, we wouldn't be seeing the outrageous doubling, tripling, or quadrupling of home insurance rates that we're seeing, especially in those areas. So you got the mortgage, you got homeowners costs. What's next? Probably utilities. Utilities are the biggest additional expense for people. Maybe less so in Roseville, like we already talked about. Maybe less so in SMUD territory because it's cheaper than PG&E by about 30%. But anybody that's listening that's in PG&E territory, your top 3 expenses are going to be your mortgage, homeowners insurance, and specifically utilities. Or maybe that utilities could be the number 1 or number 2.
Yep. Or even taxes, right? So if you're talking Melrose and property taxes,
yes,
depending on new development areas.
By the way, solar does not add to the property tax basis of a house. So you do not have to pay extra property taxes because you add solar. Ching, boom, boom.
Boom. I did not know that. So I like what you're saying, though, about the value. It's not a linear thing because people always, especially people in larger homes, when I'm meeting with them in the living room, they're like, well, my home should be worth a whole lot of money because I'm basing it off the average price per square foot. I'm like, you have a 5,000 square foot house. The average home is 2,500 square feet. Of course, the price per square foot, like your home is going to be worth so much. But there's so much more that goes into that equation. A friend of mine, Ryan Lundquist, likes to use the comparison of a Honda Civic and a Ferrari are basically the same size. They cover the same surface area, but they're 2 very different cars. They're 2 very different costs. Right. And so there's a lot of factors that go into the value of a home. So that would make sense why there's a whole lot more factors that go into the value of a solar system. And it's not just a simple 4% increase, 4% bump.
Well, like take, for example, contextual experience, right? So like if somebody's already had solar and benefited from solar, are they not going to prioritize a house that has solar itself? In other words, they've had real world experience. They understand it. Now, that might be different than somebody moving across country to California, has no idea what's going on in PG&E territory. They see 2 different houses they love. They're 2 different prices, but they don't have the context or the experience of living in this environment, paying what you pay PG&E. So they might not assign as much value to a house that produces its own power.
Absolutely. And so what you're talking about, though, is that not all solar systems, whether it's leased, whether it's owned, whether it's a NEM 2.0, NEM 3.0, they're not all the same. They don't have the same value assigned to them. And I think the same would hold true for solar brokers.
Correct. Thank you, Johnny. You got it right now. Well, if you took 100 solar folk and put them into a room, I probably represent 3 to 5. So I'm already rare being a broker because most of the solar industry is a solar salesperson captive to a specific company. They've got one company, one option, the company that makes their paycheck, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not employed by any solar companies. I'm not an employee of any of them. Here's what I do. I help homeowners find the cheapest, fairest, best options for producing a power plant on their roof with various solar companies I've had experience with, because the solar industry is very fractionalized. So, for example, some companies don't do ground mounts. So what if I've got a homeowner in a rural part of Placer County that wants a ground mount? Some solar companies won't allow solar folk to do commercial jobs. Well, what if I've got a church or a commercial project that I want? What if I'm outside of a certain region? I cast a wide net with radio. What if a certain company doesn't go 150 miles outside of that area? So what a broker is somebody that has a lot of options, a lot of resources that can guide the homeowner to those resources. So when somebody works with us, our pledge to them is to get them 5 or 6 independent quotes from 5 or 6 completely different companies that we have real world experience working with. right? I've gone through 30 companies, gotten rid of 19 to net the 11 I work with now. There's a lot of shady solar companies out there. And so we want homeowners to have a good experience, fair pricing, and to feel empowered with knowledge through the process.
So when you say you eliminated some of those solar companies, what were some of the shady things that you were like, hey, I can't recommend you anymore?
Problems with the install, functional problems with the quality of work that they do. Another example is I had a company, cheaper isn't always better and better isn't always cheaper. I had a company that I worked with, always the cheapest, best quote. But then when you get into the process, after somebody signed a contract, they'd want to do a change order. So that I just don't like that. I like predictability. I like fair. I like common sense. And so we've really had to, weed out some of those bad players in the game to net the ones that we have now, which is all the more reason if you're listening, if you've ever wanted to explore solar, do yourself a favor, text us. We communicate with our audience via text. If you text SOLAR, SOLAR, to 84503, we'll be able to give you our latest summary, which is all the 2024 incentives in solar that we got available, and you'll have a mechanism to contact us if you're interested.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shawn, for hopping on the show today. Again, that's Shawn Davis with SolarWise, and we look forward to having you back on the show in the near future.
Hey, love that.
Awesome.